Oh boy, I can't wait to play Starcraft for the first time. Oh, I just love old retro PC games and Blizzard Entertainment and RTS games. I've heard so much about Starcraft, I can't believe I've never picked it up before. Well, enough talk, guys. Time to just pick up the sticks and game, I guess.
The Confederacy.
Confederate traffic.
Confederate propaganda.
Our Confederate friends.
The flood. The Confederacy.
Whoa! Well, surely Blizzard wouldn't just throw a Confederate flag in their video game without a poignant political point to make, and surely slavery is at least addressed in some capacity, or... What up, wacky gamers? It's Nick Mosley, the Wacky Gamer. Right here on the Wacky Gamer channel, we're going to be talking about some of the more popular games that have come out over the last few decades, their political themes, how often those games really mishandle their politics, and what the consequences of that can be.
Fucking pronouns!
So, if that sounds like it's up your alley, you really should smash that subscribe button. You should really smash that like button. I'm really just doing this for money and clout, so that would really go a long way. Thank you, guys. So let's talk about Starcraft. If you don't know what Starcraft is a real-time strategy game. It is the most famous RTS game. It is famous for needing more inputs than in open heart surgery. It's famous for being more famous than soccer at some point in a lot of different countries. We actually get a ton of gaming terms from it too, like cheesing. It was huge, but on a gameplay level. Massive competitive scene, tons of YouTubers making content, but not a lot of people really talking about the story or giving a fuck about it. So when I picked the game up like a year ago, I was super surprised to learn the human faction, for the first half of the game, fights for a nation literally called the Confederacy that flies the American Southern Confederacy flag. And at the same time, Starcraft makes no effort to criticize the Confederacy or slavery, so I want to talk about how this game uses those really shocking, controversial images, to anyone who might not have known about it, and just to talk about how that use isn't super justified. So the whole aesthetic of the game is very much based on the Space Marine genre. Think Warhammer, Starship Troopers, and a big element of that genre is the idea you're fighting for like a comically, satirically evil organization. But for the first half of Starcraft, you're just literally fighting for the Southern Confederacy, which is obviously very on the nose, but maybe there's some nuance. Maybe it's a sci-fi satire of the Confederacy in that same sense. And before we go any further, I do want to acknowledge I am a white guy, you know, I'm not trying to speak on anyone's behalf or anything like that here, but I haven't seen anyone analyze this online at all, and I think it is really weird this was in such a popular game. So first off, let me tell you what the Confederacy is in StarCraft and what they do in the game. So hundreds of years in the future, these two alien species that have been fighting each other for thousands of years, the Zerg and the Protoss, end up in this remote sector of space that the Terrans occupy, and the Terrans are ruled by the Confederacy of Man. And what you can glean from them in-game is that they are rednecks. They fly the Confederate flag, they all speak with the Southern drawl, they name things after Confederate points of pride. I mean, for all intents and purposes in-game, they are Space Confederates. It's an alternate history where the Confederates won the war and expanded into space, but we'll get to that later. So the Zerg and the Protoss end up on this remote planet, and the Confederates just let the aliens kill all of the humans because they were being disloyal. And then Jim Raynor, our main hero, and his band of brave good guys, who you mostly follow and play as, start saving all of the colonists and protecting them, so the Confederacy arrests them for dissidents. But then this super cool guy out of nowhere, Mr. Arcturus Manx, who has been leading a Bolshevik-style revolution against the Confederates, breaks Jim and the boys out of prison. So Jim and Arcturus team up, and they find out about this thing called a psi emitter that the Confederates have been using to attract Zerg to colonies that they don't like. So Jim and Arcturus, they use the psi emitters to wipe out the Confederacy of Man. Not because of slavery, but because they're bad, because they're evil guys, you know, it's been established or whatever. And then there's this dope cutscene with all of these ships decked out in Confederate flags getting blown to pieces, but then a huge plot twist, Arcturus Manx turns out to be a bad guy all along and seizes power to rule the Terrans as an equally evil Stalin figure. But yeah, after that, the Confederacy is pretty much never mentioned again, which is good, because it's weird. And right after that portion of the story was over, I felt a little weird. Because after that cutscene where all of the warships with Confederate logos are getting blown up, there's another cutscene that foreshadows Manx's evil, shadowy Stalin dominion. And it's like, wait, I'm not supposed to enjoy all of these slavery enjoyers get vaporized in space? I'm now supposed to huddle up and worry about the dangers of Bolshevism? Like, what? What are they trying to say here? That's what they're trying to use this shocking imagery for? Some good and bad guys on both sides remarks? Some twin evil horseshoe theory nothing BS? And 1998, when this came out, was not that long ago. People knew the Civil War was a touchy subject at that time. So I was kind of in disbelief, so I went online to see what other people thought about the game's use of the Confederacy, try and figure out what Blizzard was trying to do here, and apparently, I'm a big idiot, guys. I'm a fool, because apparently these guys who fly the Confederate flag around everywhere and speak like Mitch McConnell have nothing to do with the Confederacy. Yay, I was wrong, guys. This is all apparently explained in the 100-page manual that would have come out with the game on release. Now, as we know today, game manuals are pretty puny things if you're even lucky enough to get one with a physical copy, but back then they would have been these massive pamphlets that went super in-depth on character and faction history, as well as explaining controls. But enough nostalgia, let's see what the manual says about the Confederacy. So, hundreds of years before the game takes place, Earth is ruled by the United Powers League, which is like this evil conservative police state that takes over from the Soviet Union after they won the Cold War. So pardon me for thinking this game was an alternate history where the Confederates won. This is obviously an alternate history where the Ruskies beat us in the 80s. I don't know how I thought otherwise. Anyways. So the UPL, the United Powers League, has all these political prisoners, and they send them off from Earth in these big spaceships to colonize this far-off planet. But those spaceships crash land on a different, even more far-off remote planet with no contact to Earth, so they decide to make a new nation called the Confederacy of Man. So they start naming stuff after General Lee and Gettysburg and start flying the hideous flag and rapidly conquer and expand territory until you play as the big powerful Confederacy of Man at the start of the first Starcraft game. So like, sure. Yay! We're not playing as the actual Confederacy from the real American Civil War, but I'm still scratching my head why these people are flying this flag. Why are they naming stuff after this? Why do they love the Confederacy so much? There's still questions here. Why did this group of prisoners decide to model their entire society off of the Southern Confederacy? And why is Blizzard using these shocking images if they're trying so hard in the lore of their game to separate those images from its actual history? What are they trying to say here? So I dug deeper online, tried to find an answer to any of these questions, and the most analysis I've seen on this subject comes from a top comment on a Reddit thread asking the question, is the Confederacy in Starcraft related to the American Confederacy? This screen grab is the Rosetta Stone of information on this subject. If you Google Starcraft and Confederacy, this thread is going to be the #1 thing that pops up. If you look at other discussions online about this subject, as in like 7 others, you know, the points this guy makes are going to be parroted over and over and over again. So for the next portion of this video, I want to just completely destroy the points that this guy makes. So let's jump right in. The 2 important things that this guy says are, A, the characters in StarCraft could not have known about slavery, not just because the Civil War takes place so long before the events of the game that the details of it have become legend, but also because the starship that the prisoners crash-landed with had its computer damaged in the process and its historical records with it. And B, because the Confederate flag is necessary in accentuating the sci-fi redneck aesthetic that the game tries to capture. Now, I have read every single Starcraft wiki page entry that there is about the Confederacy. I have read the game's almost 100-page manual. I have read Starcraft 2, Heaven's Devils. I have read Starcraft Liberty's Crusade, the 2 lore books that take place exclusively in the prehistory of the game in the Confederacy. The former of which contains a 14-page timeline on the Confederacy's inception. And there is nothing. There is nothing to back up that the Terrans don't have records of slavery, and I can prove it. So first off, you're telling me the damaged computer records have enough information about the Civil War to include Gettysburg and General Lee and the exact design of the Confederate flag, and all of the supplementary information about why those terms are important, but there wasn't any information about slavery whatsoever? Like none? Just threaded the needle on that one? I can suspend my disbelief for literally every single other thing in this game, but this is unbelievable. Even in the book, at one point, Jim Raynor says, in exclamation, "Samuel J. Houston on a bicycle." Page 113, right there. And when I read that, I was like, shit, I don't know who that is. I gotta read up on more StarCraft lore. I'm not familiar enough with this world. Samuel J. Houston is a niched 19th century leader of pre-inception of the state Texas. I had to look that up. I didn't even know who that guy was, right? Like, we're supposed to believe that these characters are so familiar with 19th century American Southern history that they can just make references with each other about people like that. But I'm not supposed to believe they knew about slavery in the Civil War? Come on! You have no idea how insanely and obsessively I poured through these books for there to be some one-off line about how, oh, the computers crash landed and all the references to racism got glitched out of our records. That would be so funny and stupid and at least make this story make a little bit of sense, but it's not here. The only thing that I could find that was like kind of similar was a one-off line on page 17 of Starcraft Liberty's Crusade that said that the design of the Confederate flag used in game was based off of a memory of a legend of old Earth. But the game only takes place in the year 2500. 700 years is not enough time to turn the Civil War into a memory of a legend of old Earth. 700 years does not turn the Civil War into the Aeneid. I could tell you the exact geopolitical factors that led to the Peloponnesian Wars, and that was 2,500 years ago. And sure, maybe if there was some one-off line about how the computers were damaged, that would be a great reason to not think, like, Jim Raynor and Sarah Kerrigan are racist. You know, they don't know the weight of that iconography. I do know, though. Most Americans know. The player knows. Chris Metzen knows. Our historical documents are not damaged. We can dig for not too long to figure out what the Civil War was about. Slavery. So even if that prevents Jim Raynor and Kerrigan from being literally sci-fi Jefferson Davis, it would have done nothing to remove the offensiveness, the historical weight of those images in what really should be just a comic-y sci-fi action game. And again, if this is an attempt at that Space Marine satire, what is it saying? And also, very importantly, that memory of a legend line is from a book that came out 3 years after the game. 3 years after in a book. I cannot think of a way for information to be more disconnected from a game. For context to imagery that shocking and that controversial to be less connected to that imagery. And we'll talk about why that context is so vital in a little bit, but I do want to address that second point of the Reddit post too. So, like that person and a lot of other people online say, StarCraft needs to use use the Confederate flag to accentuate that redneck in space aesthetic. And that's actually something I really like in the game, and I think Starcraft does really well. Every single story character in the cutscenes, and pretty much every single character you can click on in-game is fully voice acted with these really fantastic southern accents.
Identify target. Give me something to shoot. Orders, Captain?
The game has these great ambient cutscenes where you see the Space Marines drinking beer and listening to country music and driving their buggies in the desert, hitting Zerg with them, turning them into roadkill.
Hey Sarge, why we always gotta listen to this shit for anyway?
Cause I'm in charge, that's why. Hey, what's that? Hold on a second.
It's all very Tremors. Great movie if you haven't seen it, and very contemporary with the game, coming out in 1990. It's about a small town in Nevada that gets attacked by these underground aliens. It's pretty clear to me that Starcraft is even directly pulling from that movie at times. But Tremors is able to capture that aesthetic perfectly without using a Confederate flag. There's literally a scene in that movie where Reba McEntire shoots aliens in her doomsday bunker. I can't think of anything more southern and sci-fi than that. And whoa, they did it without a fucking Confederate flag. I think it's just such a lame excuse and just completely unnecessary in cultivating that aesthetic. Because really, Southern culture exists outside of the history of the Civil War. They're not exactly attached. And like I said, the game already does a really good job of capturing that aesthetic. It doesn't need to throw the flag in there. So I'll stop avoiding it. I keep asking this question. I'll finally answer it. What is StarCraft trying to say with this use of the Confederacy? What are they saying about the Confederacy? And this is something that really stumped me for a really long time. Obviously, I've had a lot of time to think about it while changing my shirt. They're definitely making that twin evil comparison between fascism and communism with Manx and the Confederacy, which I guess they do a pretty good job of. It foils that never-ending conflict between the Zerg and the Protoss, and that theme and that connection is definitely something they expand on in the extended universe. But that's still such a milquetoast takeaway, and still so disconnected from a need to use the Confederacy specifically. And it wasn't until I started reading this article about Gone with the Wind's use of the Confederate flag that it really clicked for me. One of the most famous and the most controversial shots from this movie is this woman looking through a camp of wounded fighters for a man. As this woman is looking for this man, the camera slowly pans out and you see all of these wounded soldiers, and as the camera's panning out, the music is swelling and the amount of soldiers just looks endless, and it ends with this shot of a tattered Confederate flag swaying in the wind. And it's supposed to be kind of a gotcha, right? You see all of these wounded men wailing and writhing on the ground, and you see the scale of it, and you're supposed to empathize with them. You're supposed to feel bad. And then it's like, oh, I caught you. You're not supposed to like the Confederates, but I caught you feeling bad for them. I got you. You know? And this echoes a very popular theme in movies about the Civil War at that time, which was this idea that the average person fighting in the Civil War was completely detached from the ideologies driving it. That really the human reaction to the Civil War was not of intellectual repugnance to slavery and the people who died defending it, but instead empathy for the common man who was butchered by our politicians and military leadership. And what's super interesting is that a eerily similar shot is in StarCraft. And not only that, but it directly precedes that other cutscene I talked about where all those Confederate ships get blown up. Now, I don't want this to be too much of a stretch because, honestly, StarCraft does not put too much focus on that shot. It's not dramatic. It doesn't have any plot relevance, really. It's not important. But it's too similar to that shot in Gone with the Wind for it not to scratch the same part of my brain, for me not to think that the game is making the same point as that movie. Through the Dominion, through the Confederacy, StarCraft makes this point that the ideologies that create war are detached from the motivations, the needs of the people that fight them. This is a theme that is also touched on a lot more in the books that I have read. And I think it's a really good and a really important point to make, and a point that I really agree with. But making that point through an equivalency to the Civil War is in really poor taste. And the use of Confederate imagery is, again, completely unnecessary in making that point. So first off, as much as I agree with the idea that politics are removed from the decision-making of an average soldier fighting in war, you can't really loop that into a framework with the Civil War. There are tons of wars that were fought over nonsense, BS reasons. I mean, look at the last 10 global conflicts America has been in. But the Civil War is a uniquely political war. I mean, you have one side fighting for something very evil and very bad, you know, racial chattel slavery. And you have the other side fighting for the end of that. And sure, there was a draft, and the majority of the people in the Civil War didn't give a fuck about any of that. But you can't draw a moral equivalency between those two thoughts. That's not two sides of the same coin. That's liking slavery and not liking slavery. I think I've done a pretty good job of explaining why this use of the Confederacy is so messy, so let's talk about what the consequences of that are. So, when you make a game like this that showcases all of these racist Confederate symbols and ideologies, and you create a story that says, hey, these ideas aren't really that bad or that important, and if you don't explain why these ideologies or images are controversial or criticize slavery or do anything to affirm that that war was about slavery, you make a very specific kind of person with very specific ideas feel very safe in your game. You are creating a safe space for racists and actual Confederates to feel really safe and not challenged, and that does have consequences. Starcraft, and Starcraft 2 specifically, had a ginormous racism problem. You can find tons of Reddit threads and gaming threads from over a decade ago complaining about tons of explicit racism in chat. And hey, I'm no fool, you know, I know that racism in online gaming predates StarCraft. It's something we're still battling today. But it was bad. It was bad in StarCraft. I don't think I can even show you what was in those threads that I saw, but I've been playing League of Legends for 10 years. Like, I've seen the trenches. I played CSGO in 2014. Like, this stuff made me blush. I mean, people wrote songs about it. People made websites about it. People wrote it into their guides about how to get good at the game. It was to the point where I would definitely say racism was an integral part of StarCraft's online culture. Not only that, but there were significantly less black players on a professional and casual level for games at that time. I think this thread that I found from a Team Liquid forum from a few years ago really sums up everything I'm trying to say here. So, a black player asks why there isn't any diversity in StarCraft 2, and the user Social Send replies with this. He says, "I'm half black, and I can put it into some perspective for you. I've been GM forever. Grandmaster means top 200 in the entire region, by the way. Been top 10 GM. Been top 16 for numerous seasons. I've qualified for numerous WCG regionals and Brood War. You go to other forums and it's just blatant racism plastered everywhere. You go on StarCraft 2 and there is a perception of normalcy, fairness, which is weird. Then you play a tournament and win to advance far, and your opponent demands a rematch for no reason, and you have to give it to him or forfeit. Thus, you have to forfeit. And then the organizer takes it upon himself to call you dumb and shit-talk you for, well, winning while being black. This user has been banned for this post. And then the rest of this thread is just idiots making fun of him, calling him a troll for saying he's a black grandmaster. I look up that user's Starcraft profile, 1v1 grandmaster. That is so sad. That is like the saddest thing I have ever read on the internet. So obviously this racist culture is real and affected a ton of black players. And I don't want to say that the story in Starcraft led to that culture being present. I think that would be really reductive. Obviously Blizzard's moderation and banning team is heavily at fault for that, as well as just Western white supremacy. But centering your game around symbols of slavery and then not criticizing them really doesn't help, you know? And I really do 100% believe that was a factor in that culture being created. If you fill your game with things racists like, they are going to play your game. They are going to fill your chats with racism. They are going to ostracize people of color from playing that game. And that's exactly what happened to Starcraft. Gone with the Wind was one of the most popular movies ever released of all time. If you adjust box office records with inflation, it's one of the biggest film releases ever, period. And the year it came out, it won a record-breaking 8 Oscars, including Best Picture. Now, despite that, we don't ever really talk about Gone with the Wind. We've kind of left it behind. In 2014, the Oscars took a look at all the movies that came out 75 years beforehand. All of the big classics got huge tributes, you know, Wizard of Oz, The Godfather, but Gone with the Wind got like a half-second clip. It was barely mentioned. This would also be the year that 12 Years a Slave would win Best Picture. Starcraft has also fallen out of popularity from the era it was the biggest game out there. Sure, the RTS genre in general has, and Lord knows Blizzard doesn't know how to handle their intellectual property, but I think it's something beyond that. There is an irrelevancy to Starcraft's story now, a lack of care to sensitive topics that really just doesn't go as unchecked for video games anymore. There is a reason why there wasn't nearly as much publicity or popularity for the remaster of Starcraft as there was for Warcraft 3. Both are equally beloved retro RTS games. Both are titans of the Blizzard catalog. Both came out around the same time, and both were definitely in need of big graphical upgrades. But I didn't even hear Starcraft was getting a remaster until I downloaded the thing. Where those Warcraft 3 reforged controversies and advertisements were inescapable for months. People just don't care about Starcraft anymore, and as much as I love this game, I don't blame them. Thank you so much for actually watching the whole video. If you got this far, thank you so much. You mean the world to me. You are my world, my apple of my eye. I want to say thank you so much to all of my friends for their love and support. Christian, Kenny, Carlo, Chloe, Jacob, Ian. Thank you as well to my lovely and talented girlfriend for all of her love and support. You can check her out on YouTube. She's doing some of the best ASMR there is on the website right now. Daisy Chain Lizzie. Huge shout out to DJ Yurusu for letting me use his banger track at the intro and what you're hearing right now. He's got a new project out with Death Drive called A Bit Closer to Heaven. Check it out anywhere you find music. It's fucking life-changing. Lastly, again, thank you so much for watching. I got two whole new videos coming out soon, as well as like a whole other series that I'm planning, so get in while you can, guys. Subscribe now. It's a good investment. Trust me. Your subscription is in good hands. Yeah, but that's it. Thank you so much, guys. This is the Wacky Gamer, signing off. Till next time. Whoa.